Hello everyone, welcome back to today's video. So today we are going to be discussing the 6 different hand stitches that everyone should know how to do. Now I'm really thankful that my mom taught me these stitches because she taught me that if I learned how to hand sew there would be no limit to anything that I could make. And she happened to be right. So today we are going to be discussing this nice little hand stitch right here that's used in like key fobs and other leather work. This is the deer hide that we tanned and put inside there, so I might do another video on how to do this later on. This is my old 45 here, and this is a holster that I'd made, and this is the stitch that I used for that, so we're going to be talking about how to use those stitches as well, and this will be very practical, especially if you do any kind of prepping or anything like that. So this stuff does really help, and will get you a long ways in a very short period of time. And this is some hole that I've got in a pair of jeans. Now normally we don't get large big holes like that right away, but some of the stitches that I'll be showing you today will teach you how to repair that and keep that from happening, so then your clothes will last much longer and work for you. Alright, so we've got our stitches handy. This is what we call a blanket or a running stitch. So basically front to back, looks the same on both the front and the back. This is what your stitches, all your stitches are going to be based on, is this simple stitch right here. Very easy to do. Most kids know how to do this. You can use it for embroidery work and things like that if you want to as well. But this stitch is your very basic foundational stitch, and it is amazing, and it morphs into others. So we'll move on to the next one. This is a saddle stitch. It's also kind of like a running stitch, but done with 2 needles, and I will show you how to do that as well. This is what we call a back stitch. It looks very much the same as the saddle stitch, except when you flip them over on the back, saddle stitch looks the same on the back, but the back stitch does not. So we'll teach you how to use that and what practical uses you may want to use it for. And here we have the Alluring blind stitch. So unless I wasn't using the red thread that I'm using, you probably wouldn't be able to see that. So this is the blind stitch, and we'll show you why you might need to know this and how you will use it. And here are 2 different edgings for blanket stitches. Now if you bought a blanket at a store or your grandma made a blanket for you, this is what you'll normally see on the edges to decorate the blankets, and this stitch is awesome. Has some good practical uses for it as well, especially in clothes making and things like that. I've got a needle handy right here, and I've already got some thread. Now I decided I would use red because it shows up pretty well in the video. So I've got this green mat, and we're going to work with that. Hopefully I can stay within the frame of the camera so I can teach you guys how to do this. So here's my front and here's my back. So front to back, get it all the way up there, back to front. Very simple, very easy to do. I'm going to go ahead and tie this off. Any old knot will do. You just don't want that to come undone. There we go. I'm going to go ahead and just trim the end. These scissors were something that my mom had, and growing up as a kid I saw these and loved them, so I figured it was time I get one of my own, so I did, and I love them. Love them, love them, love them. They're great. So here we go. Front to back. And back to front. Very easy. Front to back. And back to front. Now, if you've noticed, it just kind of runs right along. And you get this nice kind of a weaving pattern there. So that's kind of really helpful to know about. Alright, I'm just going to go ahead and just finish a little bit more of this row so we can compare the other stitches with it. So there is my first running stitch. Now the saddle stitch is a little bit different. What you're going to need for this one is 2 needles. So I have my 1 needle right here all ready to go, And then I have my second needle. So you're going to need to thread that on there. And one of the ways that you can secure your needles on your thread is, sometimes it likes to do that. So make sure you have a good flush edge. Sometimes twisting the end helps. Make sure I get all the little fibers right through there. There we go, that works. One way you can secure your needles to your thread without tying any knots is just take your needle and your point and go right through the thread just like that. Boop. Just like that. Pull it through your eye, the needle right there, and pull it down. And there you go. You have a knot without having a knot. It's smooth, so when you thread through your fabric and things like that, there's nothing that's going to snag, and you won't break your knots or break the needle off of your thread, and it's nice and secure, so you don't have to worry about that. Pretty awesome. Alright, now to do the saddle stitch. You have 2 needles. This might be really confusing for some people, but if you're sewing like leather horse reins or things like that, you want to use this stitch. So what we'll do is we'll start here, go front to back. Now I've got to secure my other needle, so I've got my front to back right here, so my 2 needles. I'm going to sew front to back there, and we're going to go back to front. Careful to not catch any of the threads on the other side of the needle. I'm going to go ahead and pull that. Make sure it's nice and secure. And I might have to do a couple different series of videos here. Alright, front to back. And back to front. Front to back. And back to front. And you can use 2 needles at the same time, just like that. You just kind of cross it through the section there. Make sure it's nice and snug, pulled nice and tight. There you go. And you have the same on the back as you do the front. I'm just gonna go ahead and put this needle through there, just like that. Cut both my needles off my project and just tie it off. And this is another handy little trick here for doing the saddle stitch without basically using saddle stitch rules with 2 needles. So I've got my 1 needle here. I'm going to grab some thread. I'm going to go ahead and thread my needle, which is, I think, is probably the longest part of the video. Alright, now we're going to start it off kind of like we do the running stitch up here. Front to back. Back to front. And we're going to tie it off. Just like that. Now we're going to go front to back. Back to front. Front to back. Back to front. Front to back, and back to front. Alright, now as you can see, that's kind of like the running stitch, only this is where it changes. I'm going to go back through. So while I've got kind of a loop there, I'm going to turn, go back in the way I came. This helps prevent any way of my needle catching my thread, like the saddle stitch here, so I don't catch any threads. Things stay nice and tight. I don't have to worry about having to pull it as I go forwards because it's already done for me here. So I just turn and go back in the way I came. So back to front, front to back, back to front, and front to back. So that is a really, really cool method for doing that. So basically what you end out with is the same look as you do here, but your knots end out at the back instead of the front of your work. And remember, we're working this way. So that is something that will help you as well. This is a wonderful stitch that helps you get a far distance in a short period of time. Now we are going to talk about the back stitch. Work on threading the needle, twist that a little bit there. There we go. And I'm not going to secure my knot this time. Just wanted to show you guys the first time around. Alright, so now we go front to back. I'm just going to put a little bit more distance in front of that. Here we go. Front to back. Back to front. Now this is where it gets a little bit weird. Right, normally you'll probably want your knot on the back of your project. So pretending that this, since it's got all the knots on this side, let's use this as the back. So we've got our back to front. Then we're going to go backwards. So we're stitching backwards. This is the back stitch. Right, we're going to move forwards here. And back stitch. Move forwards and back stitch. So we're stitching back towards our knot. And what happens when we're doing that on the back here is it appears on the front that you're only moving one stitch. Because here's my needle right there. Because I only have about that short space, finger space of a distance. But on the back, what's happening is I've got 2 finger spaces. See, I'm back here, but I have to go all the way there. So this is what that back stitch looks like. So I'm moving forwards 1 stitch and also another. So that is the back stitch. I'm going to go ahead and tie the knots as well on this and just secure it in place. Just like so. Now I'm going to pull up the fabric workings on these stitches here that we've got. Now what's awesome about the running stitch is you can just crumple up the fabric and put it all on your needle and then pull it all the way through. Ladies, this is what's going to give you ruffles. So if you want to do homesteading stuff and you want to make your own curtains or make your own ruffled skirt, this is that stitch that's going to allow that to happen for you. Gentlemen, this stitch just makes you get a lot further, a lot quicker. So all you do is weave the needle several times, just fold it over the needle tip, pull it through, and voila, you've got several stitches ahead of time. So that's pretty cool about this stitch. Saddle stitch is a really, really strong stitch. If a thread comes out, and I'm sure you've all seen this, when you pull on a thread, it goes right through your fabric, and you find you have a large hole in your jeans very quickly. This saddle stitch will not allow that to happen. As you can see, I'm pulling on that. All it's doing is kind of ruffling my fabric, kind of like it does with the running stitch here. So if I pull that thread, all I'm doing is pulling on thread that's going to ruffle my fabric. Or versus, if I do that on a sewing machine stitch, if I pull that, the whole thing's going to come undone. So that's the cool thing about both of these stitches that you can use entirely. Now, the back stitch is also a stretchy stitch. Now this is very, very stretchy fabric, so I can stretch that out. But because I've got extra thread on the back, I can also stretch my threads. And you can see I've got some little gaps in there. This stitch is awesome on really forgiving fabric because it will allow you to have some leeway of accidentals and things like that. If you're sewing hard material onto a very soft, stretchy material, this stitch is going to be your best friend because it is very forgiving. So that's going to be the awesome things about these stitches that are kind of about the same, but will get you a long way in a short period of time. Now for this, I could not use my grain sheet of plastic here because I am going to need to use my fabric. Now I've got my needle already secured there, and so here's what that stitch is. Basically, you can do any stitch really to get it, but you're going to take your work, and right here I just did a running stitch, put a little one at the corner up there, so I've got no weak spots on any corners that tend to get rubbed quite a bit. And so I've got the same on the front and the back. Now this is the stitch that if you have a hole in your pocket or something like that, or even you're trying to make a pillow, this stitch is something you are definitely going to need to know how to do. So basically, if you look at a pillow, you don't see any of the stitches inside the work at all. And it's because it's been sewn inside out originally, but there's been a little hole left, just like I did here. Now, unfortunately, if you're going to be trying to fix anything, you're going to want that hole sealed up. So you're going to have to do a blind stitch to secure that. And to do it, here I need to put a stitch right through here. Basically, it's going to kind of look like you're doing a box. So we're doing a checkered pattern here and up that way. But you're only doing it through the fold that's going to be inside out. So here's my one fold. I'm just going to take that, come back through the lip there that I want tucked in, just like that. That lip's going to be tucked inwards, so remember that. So I've just got almost where I'm sewing into a fold. So sew into that fold there. Now I'm going to go across, back onto the left side, and sew into the fold there. So see, that stitch is starting to hide. If I pull that nice and snug there, it disappears entirely. So I'm going to go back to the other side and go back into that folded crease right there. Just a quick in and out. If I can do that without wadding up the fabric too much. It's really stretchy stuff, and I'm using a really heavy thread, much heavier than I'm supposed to for fabrics like this. There we go. Now I go back to the right side of my fabric over here, go back and sew into that crease like so. Just do a quick in and out right there in the fold. I'm going to go back to the other side, tuck those ends in, go on the left side of my project here. Sorry guys, I can't always tell my right hand from my left. It's kind of one of the challenges I deal with in life. So that is how you do the blind stitch. The stitch that you can't see, but is going to secure all your knots and everything on the inside. This is what you can use to make pillowcases. If you're going to do any blankets, that you have anything that you want to put in there to make it more thick and warm, this is the stitch you're going to use to help seal those ends up. So that's really great stitch to know how to do. Again, if you have holes in pockets, holes in coats, and the seams are kind of stuck together like this, and the seam on the inside has come undone, this blind stitch is going to save you a lot on your clothes. And it is very simple to do, just it looks hard when you first look at it. So that's the blind stitch there. Now we're going to be talking about the blanket stitches that you can use. So we've got two different kinds right here. So what I'm going to go ahead and do is just use, oh, maybe I'll just use the top of my line up here. Start maybe doing a different one. Alright, now because this is an edging stitch, we're going to use this top edge, just as if we were going to use, sew two edges of a blanket together and finish that off. So we're going to make the knot up here on the top with the edge. Now what I'm going to do here is a little bit different. So I go from the back up over the top of my project and then come in through the back again. So back, over the top, to the back, over the top, to the back, over the top, to the back, and over the top. So that's really, really simple to do. But there is another stitch. I'm going to show you this one right here, alright? I think I'm going to tie that off. Just because I can. Put some distance between them all. Why not, right? Don't ask me how to do that knot. I'm not sure if I can teach that. Alright. Now we have our other blanket stitch that we can use. And again, we secure it right at the top, just like we did this last one. Just tying a little knot, just like so. Cutting it with my favorite scissors in the whole wide world. Right, this one's a little bit different. So we come in through the back, but see that hole right there? We've made a loop. We're going to go back through that loop. So, into the back, and through the rabbit hole. Around to the back, and through the rabbit hole. Around to the back. Whoop, lost my needle. Round to the back, and through the rabbit hole. So that's how you get two different kinds of edgings. Now what happens with these is if you have a fabric that's really, really sensitive and has a tendency to pull out or string, this method is going to help you a lot in securing that edge because it gives a false lining that's going to be rubbed. So if you needed to hem up your jeans because they're too long, this is the stitch you might use to do that. Just cut the jeans off, use this stitch, and that will help secure everything all nice and right for you. This is one that if you have material that's really strong, it doesn't fray very easily, this one is going to be just fine. Now I'm going to show you the leather work that we did. So if you notice, that stitch is the blanket stitch right there. It's just from the back, around the back, around to the back, around to the back. That's all that is. And other blankets and things, you know, you've already seen that stitch right there. And again, it just makes a nice little thread across the top where this one does not. Yeah, if you look on my holster I've got right here, you can see that that is actually the saddle stitch. See, it's the same on both the front and the back. And I hid my knots inside the seam of my leather work. That prevents any knots from being rubbed, getting pulled, potentially breaking and coming apart. That helps seal all of that right tucked inside the seam and makes my leather work hold up and last so much longer. And again, for things like these jeans, for instance, that have a hole in it, you can actually use a running stitch or even a blind stitch and kind of weave those threads back together again. and that will actually hold. So like this one, you can see how the strings on some of the edges like to pull out, just like that. A blanket stitch that's got an edge like this is going to help seal that loose thread down on top of it so it cannot pull back out again. So these are wonderful stitches that are going to help you in the long run. For instance, I'm just going to go ahead and cut this pair of jeans, or hey, what do you know? I've got an old wore out spot where my heels rub. Now what I can do on this, because this does tend to pull out a lot easier, is I can fold it on the inside, do a running stitch right here, and that will kind of help hold that in. Or I can use a saddle stitch, and that will tuck my edges in, so then I'll have a nice smooth sewing pattern just like that. So all of these things are great stitches. They're great basic stitches that everyone should know how to do. They will help you in the long run in achieving a lot of your other basic goals, and help preserve your clothes, do your leather work, a whole bunch of cool stuff. So these are the basic stitches everyone should definitely know how to do, and I hope this helps you in furthering you along on your bushcrafting or any other repairs that you need to do, because literally with just a little bit of needle and thread, your world is limitless. The kind of thread I like to use is nylon, because nylon is not a common fiber, or I should say it's not a natural fiber. Cotton tends to rot. So if you don't want your threads to rot, especially in your leatherwork, if you're going to be out in the weather doing things, don't use cotton, because it will, over time, sweat and dirt will eat into it and destroy it and break it down, because it is a biodegradable fiber. But if you use nylon, nylon's waterproofed, it does not biodegrade, it's plastic. So your stitches will hold up a lot longer. So make sure you have good nylon thread, and have that in your pocket. Something with a needle, a small kit even, you can put that in your bag, and if you have something break apart on the road, hey, you're good to go. You can repair it right there, right from your own backpack. So I hope this helps you, and I hope you enjoyed this video, and we'll be back with others later on. Have a good one. Bye now.